Hi folks, Dan here. So today we're going to talk about branding yourself after jet, which is a pretty cool topic and something a lot of jets I hear worry about. What the heck am I going to do after this program? And what job will really make me happy? Do I work in Japan? Do I work, in my home country? Do I work in a new country? So many different questions to ask. So let's jump right into it. Let's go. Okay, so the first question you're going to have to answer yourself is, what is my brand? And now that's a cliche, but I find that it means something very specific to jets. And again, as jets, there's two types of us. There's those who, did jet before, did jet immediately after undergrad or grad school, or worked for a number of years, and you might have a field or even a position to go back to. For those of you who are like me, who is, an ALT, who did jet right after undergrad, English Japanese Studies major, there are a lot of different things you could go into. So you really need to identify your skills, and specifically the skills you learned on jet, both hard and soft, that you like using. Do you like standing in front of an audience, which is something especially ALTs know very well? Location, where the heck do you want to live? That's something I struggled with. Japan, your home country, a new country, and then, what experiences do you really want to have? Do you like the idea of living in a city or someplace new? It all depends where you are in life. But for a lot of us, that involves, Japanese. Maybe you passed a certain level of JLPT. Maybe Japanese just wasn't something important to you. Maybe you're very good at Japanese, but it's just not something you like speaking, as your job. Maybe it's a hobby. If you have a skill that you don't really want to use, think about investing in new skills, or making the skill you don't want to use as much a smaller part of your job. And finally, your field. Now, this is where Richard M. Bowles' book, What Color Is Your Parachute, comes in. Now, this is probably the world's most famous job searching book. I read it shortly after JET, actually, and I recommend every JET read it. Now, some people I speak with don't really like this book, but in general, I find that those are the people who skipped around, didn't do the activities. It's not one of those books that you really need to read this one cover to cover and do all the activities. It gave me a very solid foundation or at least a direction to go into, because as I said, my major was rather broad. So something What Color Is Your Parachute talks about a lot is changing your career in 2 steps. So, changing your job and then your field, or your field and then your job. So an example would be an accountant at a bank might want to work in a TV studio, making movies, or TV, obviously. But so the accountant could decide to become an accountant for a TV studio and then try to get more into production, or maybe still working for the bank, try to, help out making commercials there, and then use that experience to segue into, a TV studio. So there's many examples you can use with this. The vital factor, though, that I think is most important for jets, and I won't read that cover out loud, I'm trying to keep the channel somewhere in the PG-13-ish, but Mark Manson's excellent, I think, inspiring book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving, and you can finish that. He talks about the most important value being, what problems do you want to have? Focus on that more than, what your dream job is, because I think anything can be romanticized. And, a lot of this comes from the fact that when a person has no problems, the mind automatically finds a way to invent some. So your job is to come to terms with the fact that problems never stop. They just get exchanged or upgraded, and that's a good thing, because it's okay for things to not be great some of the time. I think in our world of social media, Instagram especially, you see the great lives people are living, traveling, but you don't know what their life is actually like. And a lot of that comes from the fact that, you shouldn't hope for a life without problems, but hope for a life with good problems. And that happiness comes from solving them, not avoiding. Honestly, a life without problems, I think we'd all agree, would be pretty boring. This is why we play games. This is why we, you know, challenge ourselves. Humans embrace problems. But learning how to focus and priorities as problems is probably the best way you can spend your time in this job search. And as well as finding something important and meaningful. And then finally, true happiness, he argues, and I would agree with, definitely comes from upgrading your problems and finding the ones that you want to solve. A problem might be that you're bored. Okay. Then you buy an awesome game that you're interested in, and then the problem is you have to beat it. Is it a better problem to have a game that you want to beat, or that you're bored? That depends on who you're asking. Now, again, how does this all relate to Japan? Well, I think a lot of us, myself specifically, is I probably invested more time than I should have in studying Japanese. I use Japanese for my job. I like using Japanese for my job, but there are other skills I wish I'd learned a little bit more while on JET. This is going to sound really boring, but more stuff with Excel that I learned later. But it's also important, just experience and enjoy your time in Japan and network. That's another great piece of advice. Okay, just some other tips to talk about. First of all is the Boston Career Forum, which happens every November. This is free. It's awesome. I meet Jets every year who get jobs thanks to this career forum. It is geared more towards Japanese English bilingual speakers. So if you're not perhaps N1 or N2 level, you might have a harder time, but I would still suggest attending, especially if you're in the Boston area. LinkedIn, this is one of the best resources out there. I think 90% of people don't know how to use it correctly. And What Color Is Your Parachute, that first book I mentioned, has an awesome chapter on this. Informational interviews, love them. I mean, people, generally speaking, if they like what they're doing, like to talk about themselves. And it's a great, not to focus on too much on the negative, but ask people what problems do they have in their job? What are the bad days like? Because I guarantee you, everyone has good days and bad days. And it's up to you to, decide, are those bad days too high a price to pay for the good ones? And then finally, resume workshop. Especially true if you want a job in Japan, but even in the US, because even if you're one of those 5-year Jets or, you've lived abroad for a number of years, things are changing. The one-page kind of simple, bland resume, depending on the field you want to enter, might not cut it. Make sure LinkedIn is an expansion of your resume, and, you'll be gold. If you have any questions at all, please comment below. And again, please be sure to subscribe. In the description, I've posted links to the 2 books I mentioned. If you purchase through those links, you'll actually also be supporting this page. So that would obviously be appreciated. If not, there's tons of awesome resources out there, so please take advantage of them. Don't get discouraged. This is a time of transition, but I know you all do well. And again, feel free to ask any questions. Thanks again. See you next time.